Welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm Shannon Eliot. Today, I'm joined by two activists who work to promote spirituality as a means of mental health recovery. Monique Tarver is the Spirituality Liaison for Peers Envisioning and Engaging in Recovery Services, an Oakland-based nonprofit mental health advocacy organization. She is also a member of the statewide Mental Health and Spirituality Initiatives Steering Committee and is a minister who demonstrates respect for all spiritual paths. Boona cheema is the executive director for BOSS, which stands for Building Opportunities for Self-Sufficiency. It is a Berkeley-based nonprofit that serves the homeless and those with mental health issues. Boona integrates spirituality into her community work. Thank you so much for being here today, both of you.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Monique, I'd like to start with you. How and when did spirituality become a visible and more official part of the consumer movement?
Well, one of the things that we know about mental wellness is that spirituality has been a part of consumers and family members, those consumers meaning those with lived experience with mental health distress and mental health concerns, and family members' lives for a number of years. And to heed the consumer voice to want more integration of spirituality and spiritual activities in wellness and recovery plans, there was a grassroots effort that was launched in 2006 by a local champion here in Alameda County, Jay Mahler, who is the Consumer Relations Manager for Behavioral Health Care, and a group of diverse community members from different spiritual paths and ethnic groups. And they started this initiative that seeks to support the spiritual lives of mental health consumers and family members throughout the state.
So what's the goal of the Spirituality Initiative?
Really, when we talk about spirituality, we talk about a connection to a higher power or life philosophy. So it really, we look to self-define, really aligning with the ideas of the consumer movement that we want to be the expert of ourselves and identify things for ourselves. And so essentially, we want to support people whenever you leave spirituality out of a wellness and recovery plan, you leave a huge resource untapped. So we want to meet people where they are and where their needs are already getting met, but we want to build collaborations that will help us to build bridges and gaps in care.
One of the things I wanted to add was that when someone has an episode and it's severe, it does feel like your soul is broken. And to put that back together, what we need is, the role that spirituality plays as spirituality means to the person who's experiencing the illness.
Yeah,
it's an illness that hurts. It's not just an illness that exists in our brains and then gets better or doesn't, but it really actually hurts.
Absolutely.
And by treating the whole person, like Boona was speaking about, that we don't want to just, we've often seen, what we've seen as a pattern is we've seen mental health and spirituality sort of as these mutually exclusive things, and that they don't agree with one another, when in fact we find that when integrating spirituality, we see shorter recovery times, fewer relapses, and fewer hospitalizations.
The work that I do in the community has always been rooted in spirituality, and also being very open to people's religions, because sometimes that is the source of their spirituality.
Can you tell me a little bit about the survey that came out of the Spirituality Initiative?
There were several deliverables out of the Mental Health and Spirituality Initiative, the survey being one of them. One of the things that we wanted to find out from consumers and family members is exactly how they wanted to be supported in their spirituality, and if they felt it was appropriate. And overwhelmingly what we saw is that particularly throughout the state of California, and there are some other studies that support this nationally, but here in California we found that mental health consumers and family members felt that spirituality was important to their mental health, and that the mental health community should do more to support spirituality.
I can give you an example around meditation. We might not think of meditation as spirituality, but people who are living with a mental illness, when sitting in meditation, they will give you the feedback that it makes a difference, that something does change inside. The same thing you might say, for yoga, or just silence, or having space, being in the wilderness. Any of those things, I think, are really important in our recovery.
Sure.
As Boona mentioned, there are other wellness tools that people very much consider spiritual practices, like spending time in nature. And one of the things that our survey showed overwhelmingly is that yoga and meditation were a really close third, actually. What we found as a #1 wellness tool throughout the state of California, cross-culturally and cross-spiritually, was prayer. That no matter what the spiritual path was, no matter what the ethnic background was, no matter the culture, prayer was one of the #1 things that people use for their wellness, in addition to music and spending time in nature and all of those other sort of things that you can think of as a part of a spiritual activity.
I really encourage people to write their own prayers, to really take the time to, to pray as they pray, but to also use writing as a tool to write their prayers and their spiritual stories. So I think telling their stories from a space of spirituality heals while the story is being told.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to encourage people to do that.
I think it's really interesting how you both frame spirituality, because I'm sure in the people I've talked to in the general population, there's just sort of a general sense that spirituality equals organized religion. But from what you both said, it's so much more than that. It could just be prayer from yourself, spending time in nature, just connecting. Yeah, that's really powerful.
And that's what I think we need to do in terms of our work in the county, is to really, bring all these resources to our folks who are suffering, whether it's art or whether it's writing or whether it's song or music. Spirituality doesn't necessarily have to be just the quiet moment.
Sure. So how have the findings of the survey translated into work at the county level?
Well, one of the things that we've done is we've been able to identify ways that we can support the individuals that we serve. One of the reasons why we do the Day of Prayer is because of what the survey revealed. Boona has been a great community leader in that event and in inviting and uniting diverse communities, not just of faith in the way that we typically think of it, but the larger stakeholder community coming together to send prayers or positive meditative thoughts or inspirational messages to individuals and families who are living with mental health distress. I think as a consumer survivor myself, and as I talk to people about their stories, as Boona mentioned, telling their stories, we have some horrific experiences, some within the mental health system. And if you just ask someone, what has helped them survive, that's a great way to find out what that tool is and how you can support them in that, in bringing forth the maximum impact that recovery has to offer.
Sometimes the system thinks that wellness is serious business. Of course it is, but it needs to be full of enjoyment and fun and community. Nobody gets well alone. And no one gets well without support from their friends and families, and whether it's their minister or whether it's somebody from a Sikh temple, wherever they go. I think it's really important for clergy to get involved also.
Yeah, and I know, Monique, you mentioned a little bit about Mental Health and Spirituality 101, which is a training that takes place in Alameda County. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We find that spiritual communities are first responders often to crises. And one of the things that we wanted to do as we looked at how to appropriately serve communities where we see great disparities, but then, just in general, to serve the individuals that we serve within the county system, we needed to give some support to those places where they were already going, like the spiritual community. So we really wanted to broaden the competency of spiritual leaders to respond appropriately and responsibly to what individuals in their mosques or congregations, their churches, or in their spiritual community, whatever that is, how they can respond to them in a way where they are really meeting the need. So through some roundtable discussions and some of the data that we were able to collect from the survey and some other studies that were done by behavioral health care, African American utilization study being one of them, to look at how to appropriately serve African Americans who represent a large number of the individuals we serve in the county mental health system. We kind of pulled together data and collected information where spiritual community leaders were saying these are the areas that we need help in. And so we were able to kind of bridge the gap and create make a collaborative effort to make sure those needs are being met while supporting how they're already responding to the crisis, and in many instances very well.
Boona, why do you think it's important for mental health advocates and providers to collaborate with the faith community?
We're almost like two ends of, civil society. And the community-based organizations can't exist without faith-based organizations. And it's the same the other. It's a partnership that has to exist in the community, because depth lies in both sides of, both kinds of institutions. Because we're always asking very similar questions of ourselves is, what's the best way that healing happens? What are the tools that we need to use in our communities, whether it's in a nonprofit or whether it's in a church? We are asking ministers, when they prepare to do their Sunday morning sermon, they have to ask all of those questions of themselves in terms of recovery in the community, recovery in their own congregation, whether it's we're talking about mental health and mental illness today, but it could be around drugs and alcohol. It could be around anything. So when they're, going to speak to people that are going to pay close attention, it's really important that they have the answers, the soft answers that people need to hear to feel well. We can't heal people by being harsh. So I think that's something community-based organizations and faith-based organizations share, is that ability to be soft and not. I'm not trying. This is not a comparison by any means, but there are institutions where our people have to go for care that are not kind, that are not generous, that are not appealing, soft, whatever you might want to call it. They're harsh. And I think all of those institutions we need to change. And it'll take time, but they will have to change if people are going to get well.
I think Boona said something key about both having so much to offer, and that's one of the things that we stress in the training, is that we're not looking to spiritual communities to take the place of the mental health system, nor are we asking the mental health system to take the place of spiritual communities, and we're not asking either community to ignore the other. I think that there's sufficient evidence to show that when communities unite over issues, they're resolved a lot quicker, a lot smoother. So one of the things that we want to do with this relationship that mental health has with spirituality is give it some intense counseling so that it works very well, and that we are able to translate the language that we are speaking that sometimes can seem like it's a totally different language, but in fact, as Boona pointed out, it really is the same language. We have the same goal.
We still have, work to do, because people are still afraid of folks that are, maybe showing certain behaviors that they find threatening. So there's a lot of fear in the community. There's stigma. There's not a clear, open door to people who are, who are being different in that moment that they're feeling their illness. They are different, and the only way to help them sort of regain themselves is to just surround them with love and compassion and spirituality, and say, this is home. This community is your home. And in this community, we're not going to do harm to you, because so much harm has been done to people over time, especially communities that are in Alameda County that are immigrant communities. They come from, situations that have been horrific for them. And spirituality really feels like, oh, this is a common thread that we're sharing, whether I'm from Cambodia or Vietnam or somewhere else. Prayer and the sense of being spiritual are two very common themes that we can all surround ourselves with.
So you both so well explained the importance of collaboration between the mental health community and the faith community. But to follow that up, why is it important for communities of different faiths to unite, and how is that manifested, and how do they collaborate to resolve these issues?
It's, for me, it's been fascinating, because I grew up in India, and when I woke up in the morning, you could hear the imam on the loudspeaker. You could hear the Hindu temple bells ringing. You could hear the Sikh temple blowhorn go off. So for me, when I got here, it was like, where did all that go? You
didn't know what to do.
Here you all sort of have to drive to go get to a place
Yeah.
that, you know, is gathering in spirit.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important across faiths for people to actually, you know, examine the true realities of what the books are saying or what the writings are saying or what's in the hymns or what's in our songs. And it brings us together because there are more similarities than there are differences. And even the differences over time have been created more by the people that are in power in those religious bases than the intention of the
Sure.
writing itself in the
Sure.
beginning. All of the writings were meant to be, you know, more to heal and support and love people,
And togetherness.
less to, you know, what we're seeing now.
And I think we address this quite well in the Mental Health and Spirituality 101 trainings, where we utilize cultural brokers, of which Boona has been one, to come and speak to us from various specific community perspectives, but we get everybody in the room. I think one of the barriers to care and one of the barriers to collaboration is not only when we talk about mental health stigma, but then it's also the fear of really the unknown. It's what I don't know. There was a study that was done around why people have arachnophobia, why people have a fear of spiders. And one of the things that was brought out of that is because they don't have identifiable features. And so when you can't see a feature and reflect it in what you're looking at, then it sort of makes you fearful and you sort of back away. But I think once we get everybody in the room and you can look into my eyes and you can see the compassion that I have, that you can see reflected in your own walk and in your own spirituality, and you can see pieces of yourself in me, then we're able to talk about it and we're able to come to the table and realize that we really do have a common goal. And again, many studies have shown that when diverse communities of faith are speaking about a specific issue and are uniting around that issue, then that issue sort of disappears.
That's been my experience, even when working with my staff and the participants in BOSS, that when you bring together different cultures, people of different levels of education, when the real multiculturalism of Alameda County is together, it's one of the richest experiences to experience. Because I think in some ways we've all decided that we want this community to be the best. And we want to practice the best things in this community so we can keep our folks well. And I think this is going to be a powerful movement as it's building. I see that it's the beginning, little steps that we're all taking, but it could be a real national model if we just stay on it. Because the question of religion always comes up for nonprofits. It's like, oh, you're not supposed to do religion.
Sure, it's a sticky issue.
But we're not allowed to proselytize, but we're allowed to have dialogue. And as long as we're framing it as, you know, an exploration of getting to know people that you're working with and the folks that, you know, that you're serving and are in service with, it's really important to know what they believe and what their belief systems are. And always believe that their belief systems are most sacred and are to be held sacred by all of us together.
For many people, their spiritual path is a part of their culture, and that's part of how you build the relationship to help come alongside the healing process, is to get to know who an individual, who they are, and a lot of times that's steeped very much in their spiritual beliefs.
One of the ways we use in BOSS is to ask folks to, you know, do a 5-minute written piece on who their spiritual hero is, or who their, you know, what moves them, whether it's a person or whether it's a place. And just the reading, you know, and sharing that stuff. I'm always amazed at how deep people go when you put spirituality as an intention. If you ask folks to, you know, write about religion, it would be very different. But spirituality kind of broadens, you know, pushes the edges of religion and gets us to other places that we might not by just, you know, being in the texts of the religious texts, beautiful as they are.
Yeah. Monique, can you tell me a little bit about your role at Peers as the spirituality liaison?
Sure. Peers is charged with the social inclusion campaign, the idea that we want to make sure that we're not leaving anybody out, and that we are including individuals with mental health challenges and their families in a way that that is acknowledging that they live full and meaningful lives and are productive members of society. One of the things that the social inclusion looks at is media, how are mental health consumers portrayed in the media, and whether that's accurate or not. And then outreach, reaching out to communities, different communities, so that we're able to dialogue about mental health issues, education, and then empowerment, and then spirituality, engaging people in their spiritual walk. I am the spirituality liaison as a part of that social inclusion campaign, so I coordinate the spiritual activities and anything that would help to support the lives of the individuals that we serve in their spiritual journey as it is in their recovery and in their wellness. So one of the things that we do is we celebrate diversity every month through an open community dialogue where we bring in cultural brokers like Boona and others who have come from the Native American spirituality and community and Buddhist community and Islam and Sikhism and Sufi and just a wide array and diverse panel of speakers who come in and they teach us about those communities where we find overwhelmingly that there are more things that unite us than divide us. And then we do some other wellness practices. Last month we did a presentation on Kapositar, which is a wellness practice that incorporates multicultural spirituality and some of the ancient forms of healing like Tai Chi and yoga and meditation and so on and so on. And so we do that every month, the first Thursday at Peers. Then we do other events, trainings. We train the provider community about how to engage and have that conversation around spirituality in a way that's respectful and meaningful. And then we also educate and mutually learn from the spiritual communities in our Mental Health 101 for faith leaders. So all of those things that really are essential to wellness and as it pertains to spirituality is what I do really essentially at Peers.
One of the things that we've started to do, because if you're going to preach it, you might as well be doing it. And,
Ideally, yes.
we've adopted yoga as an organizational tool. So once a month at our administrative offices, because you can say a lot to people when you're an executive director or something, but to actually practice with people, I think is most important. And I would encourage that people who work for Alameda County, people who work in nonprofits, really start joining us to see how joyful this is. And if it comes from the top, it's kind of trickles down. So if in my organization we're 100 staff, if they hear, oh, Boona and the managers get to do yoga every Wednesday, why not us? And then the folks, it's like, why not us?
Yeah.
So we already have yoga in 5 of our programs, and we will have that in all of the programs in a couple of months. We also do theater as an expression, and doing spiritual themes around theater. So it's the mix of all of those things that makes life creative and exciting, because our folks need that. They have not had a lot of liberty in terms of participating at levels that they want to, and there's so much talent in the mental health community, the consumer community, that it's stunning that the talent has been buried or maybe was shamed. But when it starts to come out again, these are people who become leaders, and these are people who are like showing us. I mean, I learn more from the folks that I serve on a daily basis than I do from anywhere else. It's amazing, amazing community.
How do you both think spirituality is important when dealing with folks who are hospitalized, whether for mental illness or even a physical illness, because mental health issues arise from physical trauma as well?
When we look at people being hospitalized for mental health conditions, there is a general difference in society at large in the way that is viewed. So it's even in the visitation that individuals who are hospitalized get. You're probably far more likely to get someone visit you in the hospital if you have a broken arm than if you're there because of a mental health issue. And so you see that in hospitals everywhere. And it brings to mind an individual that I actually just spoke with not too long ago who had a family member hospitalized for a mental health condition. And just being engaged around their spirituality, which was essential to both of them, was incredibly difficult. It was very difficult within the spiritual community because the particular spiritual community that they were involved with really didn't have any understanding of what their support could be and what power it is in them just coming to visit. They hadn't taken the mental health 101 training yet. So we're working on that, right? And so even in getting people to visit in the hospital was very difficult. And then what we saw on the flip side of even the hospital staff, in supporting that family around what was important to them, it didn't happen. They didn't have any resources or tools really into how to respond to what that need was. And so it was incredibly hurtful and painful for that particular family. And so now they're emerging with some different tools and a different take on it in which they will, take advantage of opportunities to speak and tell their story so that we can get the message out that this is important.
I'll tell you a very recent story. We had somebody in the hospital who has full-blown AIDS, and it was literally, carrying the person into the hospital, expecting that they were not going to come back. And 3 or 4 days, things didn't look very good. But there were people there all the time from the faith-based community, from our community, from the mental health community, from the AIDS community, praying, you're going to get well. Things are going to look up. And 10 days later, things are looking very, very good. And I do believe in the power of prayer, and that it really moves energy and shifts energy and has effect on people. And to have seen that scene, with somebody from, he's Catholic, somebody from the Catholic community, and then, he's very much into immigrant population, especially, I think, Mexicans. So seeing people of different color, different belief systems, all wanting him to get well.
Yeah.
And imagine pouring that kind of energy into someone. It has to work.
Well, that is a wonderfully positive note to end on. I want to thank you both so much. Thank you, Boona, for being here. Thank you, Monique, for being here and sharing the importance of spirituality, as well as all the work you're doing in the community, because I have a feeling it's only beginning. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can learn more about peers, spirituality, and the social inclusion campaign at www.peersnet.org. To learn more about BOSS, please visit www.self-sufficiency.org. If you would like further information on the monthly spirituality work group or mental health and spirituality trainings, please contact Minister Monique Tarver, Spirituality Liaison, at 510-832-7337. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.